Welcome back to another edition of DHN. I'm your host, as always, Wade Teamer. So, we're going to dive deeper into the Constellation Network in this video, guys. I brought it up a couple weeks back because I've been having conversations with the right people. I'm not going to tell you that I've been talking to Constellation directly, but some colleagues of mine are getting close. And because they're so close, ladies and gentlemen, they're sharing information with me about the entire landscape here in the United States. All right. Which, again, is what's lending to my sort of shift in focus. We were very global, but now we're bringing it into the States because I feel like we are so close to things popping. We have so much progress that we didn't have 4 years ago. That is why I'm keeping our attention here. But as far as this edition goes, we're going to break down DAG a little bit more. And I'm also going to share with you the biggest value drivers that I feel are already on the network for Constellation. We're going to talk about some of the applications running on the network. Some of these applications do have tokens, so if you're into that, feel free to check that out. And then we're also going to go over quickly from a technical side how DAG works. And let's start there, guys, because it's a real simple architecture. It starts with the Hypergraph. Now, the Hypergraph is a network of decentralized protocol made up of multiple independent networks known as Metagraphs, which will be the second layer. We'll get into that in a second. Built on top of the Hypergraph, each Metagraph validates and processes data according to their own internal business logic and custom consensus mechanisms before submitting their states as snapshots to the global layer 0. The global layer 0 performs final validation before including the Metagraph snapshot into the ledger. So this is akin to, not exactly the same, because the Hypergraph is a form of DLT. The example I'm going to give you is in relation to Ethereum layer 2s, in the sense that layer 2s on Ethereum batch transactions to be processed on Ethereum, which would be the layer 1. However, in this setup, the Hypergraph is the layer 0. The Metagraph would be your layer 2s that take their transactions, put them together, process them on the Hypergraph. So you essentially have the whole technical purpose of a layer 2 built into Hypergraph, the network, built into Constellation's single network. Found that to be very exciting, guys. Now, they go into a design benefit, and they say that this approach is a parallel to the reasoning behind why microservice state isolation is used in conventional industry. State should not be managed exclusively by a global linear ledger, but rather updates should be constrained to their exclusive logical service boundaries. What they're essentially getting at here is the way it works traditionally isn't efficient enough for the scale that everyone is promising this industry is going to get to. That's what makes the Hypergraph so unique, is that it creates a new form of DLT functionality by consolidating networks within networks, if that makes sense. We're going to unpack it a little bit more because the next component to the Constellation network is the layer 0. This is the base layer and final layer of consensus on which the rest of the network is built. It organizes and validates data from other parts of the network before storing it in the immutable ledger. Its work is performed by a network of validator nodes that forms the core of the protocol. The validation ability is constrained to the core interface definitions for defining logic that is easy to share between independent networks, and the functionality offered is targeted towards cross-chain interactions, messages, and shareable execution. Lastly, you have your Metagraph networks, and this is the power of Constellation. You can think of these as akin to subnets on Avalanche or parachains on Polkadot, right? Metagraphs are subnetworks that perform their own validation and consensus before submitting data to the global layer 0 for final consensus and storage. Metagraphs can be thought of as microservices that process data and act on triggers from off-chain sources. Let me tell you how powerful that sentence is, folks. So imagine a situation, and they actually going to break this down in their documentation as well. I'm going to share it with you. But imagine a situation where you have a traditional company that wants to come in and create a Web3 product. They go to another company first. They don't choose Constellation first, but they go to another company, we'll say Aptos, right? They go to Aptos first, and they want to create a fan rewards product, fan engagement product, where based on the activity that they have on their customer, they'll be entitled to certain incentives on the Web3 application. Company A goes to Aptos to create this application. The problem is Aptos doesn't have the proper mechanisms to read that data from their traditional platform. That is where this Metagraph comes into play, because these microservices can process data and act on triggers from off-chain sources. Now, there's another section here in their documentation where they talk about the difference between Metagraphs versus smart contracts, and this blew my mind. Many blockchain networks use some form of smart contract to add immutable application layer functionality to their networks. The introduction of smart contracts allow Web3 applications to flourish, but smart contracts themselves are inherently limited by the platform upon which they are built. That is the reason why Flare Network exists, folks, is because of the limited functionality of a smart contract. Albeit it is a very powerful innovation, the smart contract programmability feature of Web3, whether you're talking about payments, DeFi, gaming, it makes it go, right? However, it only makes it go if you're going from Ethereum to Polygon or within the network. With this Metagraph, it allows for that same thing to happen whether you're on chain or off chain. And that's crazy, ladies and gentlemen. That's really crazy. They expand on that here. Metagraphs, by extending a core consensus library and bringing it closer to the native application level stack, are able to accept and validate different types of data from real-world data sources like IoT sensors, ad exchanges, or even other layer 1 blockchains. Multiple layers of data validation and consensus allow Metagraphs to verify complex streams of data from untrusted external sources before submitting to the global ledger, and deal with application-specific dependencies not available to a conventional isolated contract. This was the first time I was reading this, ladies and gentlemen. And when I look at the list of projects that we follow, a lot of them live and die off of smart contract functionality. So I think, me personally, this is the most powerful component to the Constellation Network, is how the Metagraph gives a superior advantage over a smart contract. And the whole name of the game is to get this industry to the mainstream. Well, if you have a way to read existing data, or to use better terms, to use crypto jargon here, if you have a Web 2 company that wants to bring in data on your Web 3 platform, but your smart contracts can't compute that data from the outside, when we hit a mainstream run, companies are going to be bouncing like crazy between smart contracts and other options. And I can tell you there aren't that many other options right now besides Constellation, Hedera Hashgraph, because they're working with non-blockchain mechanics. Very enlightening, folks. Now, let me know if you guys, of course, have any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. But from a technical understanding, the Hypergraph is the core component to the Constellation Network. And on top of that, you now have the ability to build out applications such as fan tokens. Now, we were talking about a project called Chiliz. Their whole game plan is the fan token, fan engagement experience. However, the biggest problem that Chiliz is facing right now is they can't get into the US market. And coming from the CEO himself, they probably aren't even planning on doing it until late into 2025. That's what makes this one very different, because something else that really keeps my interest when it comes to Constellation is their work here in the United States. Now, Chiliz couldn't get involved. They're a foreign company, so forth and so on. But this company here is working within the United States, guys. And their focus is creating fan tokens, fan engagement, things like that. But it doesn't just stay with sports. They want to also incorporate this across shopping verticals, across gaming verticals. So there's an esports plug for you. Their premise: token events empowers each fan to control and share their activity. Fans will be able to purchase their tickets, venue services, and merchandise and receive real-time personalized offers from a single app or web experience. Fans can then catalog each unique moment and wrap them in an NFT, creating individual and secondary values for each of these treasured experiences. So I remember telling you guys last month about the my whole experience with the NFL draft and how I was invited, but I had to download my ticket through an official NFL One Pass application. So I took those steps, downloaded the app, and inside of that app, I was able to get access to even more incentives and more perks. Unfortunately, I didn't make the trip to the city for the draft, but I found that to be a very interesting experience. They've only been doing this a couple of years, but it reflects what we see here, ladies and gentlemen. There's going to be a market for this. So watching out for the fan tokens, the fan engagement side, it's kind of like the social NFTs, social coins. It's exactly what this falls into, guys. And when you look at it that way, as long as you get over the barriers of any, payment regulatory issues, I could see these types of applications catching steam very quickly, because there's nothing more powerful than a fan, ladies and gentlemen. All right. And I'm telling you that as one myself. So the fan token platform running on Constellation. That's very interesting because they're focusing on a particular use case. And again, having the pre-established relationships here in the States, once the US does get it together as far as when and where and how these assets can be moved, much like the CEO from Chile said, this market is going to explode. And we'll see that because of the inroads that Chile's did establish, that gives this token kind of like a blueprint to go against. Very big value driver here. Now, another one is, of course, the healthcare industry. Geneseo is their healthcare application. This is very early stage development. Very early stage development, guys. I was reading into the documentation here. Their app is still being built out. They're still establishing their rewards and incentive mechanisms. But the premise of it is you're going to get rewarded for being healthy. So when you go to a doctor's appointment, there's a certain amount of tokens for that. If you go for a run, there will be a certain amount of tokens for that. It's going to incorporate a whole lot. One thing I did read that I found to be very interesting is that it will integrate with existing healthcare apps. And they're also backed up they're fully compliant with HIPAA. So that's also an advantage there. Like I said, though, very early stage project. Oh, you can see they want to incorporate artificial intelligence as well. That's going to be that's the trend right now, folks. Everybody's got AI in their app. But this use case, I'd be very interested to see how this unfolds, because I know me personally, I don't go to the doctor as much as I should. Maybe this will motivate me a little bit more to do so. So I can see that as being a potential barrier for this app. But again, overall, I'm optimistic about the industry. And blockchain technologies, DLTs, they're not very prevalent as of yet in the healthcare market. However, there was an entire consortium formed a few years ago. Pharma Ledger. Look into that. The Pharma Ledger Foundation, where it's a group of the largest healthcare companies globally coming together to study blockchain and DLT. So there's a market for it, which is why we do see these products begin to pop up. Let's move over to another very interesting relationship that Constellation has with a company called the National Digital Foundry, or National Digi Foundry. It's a member-funded national collaboration initiative to foster continuous innovation in the digital assets ecosystem. Initially funded by the National Science Foundation, the organization is a decentralized autonomous organization that serves as a business incubator for Web3 and Industry 4.0 startups. And you can see here members of the steering committee. Now, the names you may not be familiar with: Dr. Anna Brady Estevez, Dr. David Beck, and Miss Melissa Oliver. But look at their positions, folks. National Science Foundation, U.S. Space Force, U.S. Department of Treasury. So these are the players within the U.S. government and related organizations that are steering the conversation around DLT technologies. And they have a very particular relationship with the Constellation Network. Again, why I'm bringing this asset to your attention, guys, because really what's going to happen in a few years' time is all of these small relationships that have been formed in the background for years. Once America does get ready to go mainstream, those are going to be the first ones marketed. That's just how it's going to be. Now, this digital foundry is very interesting because they're also supporting, courtesy of Mr. Space Force here, the study and development of how DLT can be applied to companies like NASA, SpaceX, things like that. Now, there aren't relationships that are established. There aren't partnerships stating that, those companies are going to use Constellation, but this lays the groundwork for that to happen. So from that aspect in and of itself, National Digi Foundry is one to watch. And on top of that, here's one that's more so on the business side once again, but this is the digital advertising application Alchemy. Now, their whole focus is to address the issue that advertisers face when they go to put out their advertisements on different platforms. Now, you may be thinking, the biggest thing I hate about being on YouTube are the ads. Why would I want to be interested in supporting a company that works in these ads? Well, see, the reason why most of us don't like them is because they're oftentimes not targeted properly, or they're way too targeted, and then it gets creepy. You ever search for one item 2 days ago? You ever search for an item and then 2 days later you see an ad for that item doing something completely different? Yeah, there is a technical problem that for the last 10 years, according to the documentation provided by Alchemy, it's a problem that hasn't been addressed. But because on the bottom line, advertisers, they're just there for the clicks. It wasn't really addressed. However, recently, the bottom line is starting to be affected now, thanks to incorporations like AI and different publishers like YouTube creating services like YouTube Premium, which allows you to get around ads. So what Alchemy is focusing on is providing a new way on both sides for advertisers and publishers to verify where their ads are going, track the performance of those ads to make sure that they're getting seen by the people who are actually interested in them. The benefit of that, and they have numbers listed in their documentation too on their website, is that it's going to reduce the cost of media spend on the advertiser side. So if you're making the media spend on the advertiser side lower, that opens the door for the possibility of higher quality ads as well as higher quality ad placement. And just from a personal aspect, to any other content creators in the audience who receive a portion of their income off of ad revenue, this also means that if it's cheaper for them to put the ad out there, there's an opportunity that we could get more money on the back end because the relationship, the deal that the ad company made with the publisher is a little bit better. So that's what I really pulled from that. When I started to read into this company, I was like, oh, that's great. That is actually great, because all it would take is for a YouTube to want to really invest in changing their digital advertising situation. And this software, this application is going to explode. I can tell you that right now, because we're talking about $150 billion, not yearly, folks, monthly, okay, going to ad spend. And that's just YouTube numbers. Now that you have platforms like Twitter incorporating ads, anywhere, any publishing source that relies on ad revenue, advertisements, ad partnerships to generate revenue, they're going to be interested in this particular software, in this particular application. So I can tell you, again, sitting in the position of a content creator where a portion of my income comes from ad revenue, I'm constantly getting information about the tug and pull going on in the ad spin industry. That's how I know that this software is one to watch. Now, again, keeping it completely level, we are a few years away, of course, because the big advertising giants, they don't want to let go of their foothold. Of course they won't. But any obstacles and barriers, you have to look at it as the nature of the beast. This entire industry is still less than 16 years old. It hasn't even gotten its driver's license yet. So, look at it that way, folks. Now, other interesting relationships, and these aren't necessarily applications, but this is on the infrastructure side. This document here is from 2019 that we're looking at, and this is details the relationship that Constellation laid down with the Quant Network. Yeah, that's a name we haven't mentioned in quite some time on this channel, but you can see the contributors to the paper: Benjamin Jorgensen, CEO and founder of Constellation, Mr. Gilbert Verdian himself, the founder of the Quant Network and the inventor of the TC307 blockchain standard, as well as Wyatt Meldman-Flock, Matthias Goldman, and Benjamin Diggles, who I've seen on X recently. Got to make a point to follow him. But this document goes into the what, the how, and the why of the relationship between Constellation and the Quant Network. And I can just read this first paragraph from the overview. Again, links to this documentation will be in the description. But the Quant Network and Constellation Network integration will enable companies to build cross-platform and interoperable big data, IoT, and AI production sandbox test environments. This integration will be powered by Constellation's Hypergraph and Quant's Overledger interoperability capabilities with 11 permissioned and permissionless blockchain networks and protocols. The interconnectivity of the two technologies powers possibilities of opening up large data sets by Hypergraph to access new users, clients, and networks through Overledger. Now, again, the date, November 2019. And you may be wondering, well, it's been 5-6 years. We ain't seen nothing, ain't heard nothing. We barely hear anything from Quant. Well, hold on. The Overledger network has just been incorporated into something called, it's being developed in the UK. Should have had it prepared here. But a lot of this stuff, guys, I like to package it as if we're having a conversation standing in front of each other. So I'm not going to always have the information on deck, but I did put it out on X. Regulated Liability Network out in the UK. That's what you can look up. But the Overledger technology is basically the core component to that regulated liability network. Now, when you dig into that regulated liability network, you discover that there are a lot of US payment giants also involved. As a matter of fact, MasterCard alongside Chase, as well as BNY Mellon, they're also working on their own multi-currency network. Now, again, the key component of the relationship between Quant and Constellation is the connectivity between the Hypergraph and the Overledger. So if you're giving players here in the United States the ability through Constellation's Hypergraph to make use of Quant's Overledger gateway, which has a globally recognized blockchain standard by companies here in the United States, I think I just found Quant Network's US plug. And it's been hidden in the background all this time. So when it comes to key value drivers on the Constellation Network, guys, you got to stop playing with it. Constellation is an asset we will be keeping our eyes on going forward. If you have any other questions about the network or the chain, feel free to put them down in the comments, guys. I'll do my best to try to break it down for you. Working on other avenues for us to have information. Don't want to give out too many details. I'm learning to keep things a secret, but you will see it very soon. With that, if you're looking to pick up some crypto, maybe Constellation Dag. Uphold is the exchange that I'm using, folks, and I'm telling you, man, I've had the best experience ever. Not only am I able to invest in cryptos, but they have a self-custody option called the Uphold Vault that you can use to store your assets securely. They are a channel partner, have been for a couple of years. So yes, I do get compensated if you decide to use the link in the description. I thank you in advance, but I promise you, you're not going to be disappointed. So now it's time for the best part. If that money is digital, so is the hustle.